Red warning signs for American democracy. Tonight, harrowing new threats from right-wing leaders saying out loud what the vengeance and the retribution that Trump vows is going to look like. The latest warning is from a notorious conservative figure who rose to prominence by justifying some of the most heinous and controversial actions undertaken by a modern Republican administration. During the height of the war on terror, the Bush-Cheney team looked for legal support for torture policies, and they got it from this man, John Yoo. The DOJ lawyer who authored the infamous torture memos. It launched a scandal, triggering investigations, and eventually drawing bipartisan and global rebuke. The Washington Post dubbing it one of the worst ideas of the Bush era. That lawyer, John Yoo, is now bringing his same right-wing lawless approach to the Trump era. Except this time, it's not about justifying torture on terror suspects. He's trying to justify Trump's attacks on domestic political rivals. At a conservative conference this week, Yoo calling on Trump to, quote, retaliate against Democratic leaders who he falsely claims, without any evidence, launched politically motivated probes into Trump, saying, quote, you have to retaliate against them in exactly the same way until you get some deterrence if we're not going to become a banana republic. Unfortunately, we're going to have to use banana republic means. So this isn't an isolated comment. You saying something very similar recently on Fox News.
Republican DAs indict Hunter Biden or indict Joe Biden, just in the way that blue state DAs have been indicting, right, President Trump, because that's the only way I think you can get Democrats to stop abusing the legal system, to stop breaking the norms that they have. Now they're so worried because once they've destroyed all these norms in the way they've gone after Trump, they realize, right, Republicans can turn around and do the exact same things to them. Look, I don't want this norm to have been broken. I wish we were not using the criminal justice system to interfere in politics. But how else could you deter Democratic DAs from doing the same thing?
So don't do what Jesus would do. Don't love thy enemy. Play the long game.
Unfortunately, Jesus wasn't running for president.
Wu is the most credentialed legal voice on the right yet, amid a chorus of MAGA figures pushing retribution.
We now find ourselves struggling with people who have evil intents. Get mad at me if you want to. Some folks need killing. It's time for somebody to say it.
We're going to come after you. Whether it's criminally or civilly, we'll figure that out. But yeah, we're putting you all on notice.
We are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
This comes as MAGA lays the groundwork for Trump to reshape the Justice Department in his image. The right-wing Project 2025 calling for the end of an independent Department of Justice, instead placing it under Trump's total control, allowing him to launch the kind of investigations he and allies like you are calling for. Trump knows how toxic this all sounds to most voters, so he's recently tried to distance himself from it. Today, though, ABC News reporting on the extensive links between Trump, his campaign, and Project 2025. Democrats now spotlighting this toxic GOP agenda as part of their Decision 2024 messaging. And it just might be working. The Biden campaign highlighting this chart that you see on your screen. It shows Google searches over the last month. That blue line, that's Project 2025. That red line, that's Taylor Swift. And the yellow line is the NFL. You can see searches for Project 2025 at the top, that blue line, now surpassing searches for Taylor Swift and the NFL. Joining me now is Skye Perryman, the president and CEO of Democracy Forward, a progressive legal organization pushing back against Project 2025. And back with us, David Jolly, former Republican congressman from Florida and an MSNBC political analyst. My thanks to both of you. Skye, first to you. I want your reaction to what we just showed, which is incredible, right? Project 2025 being searched more than Taylor Swift. And then I want to get your response to what you're hearing from John Yoo, who's calling for Republicans to retaliate. That's his word, retaliate against Democrats.
Well, it's important that Project 2025 is getting the attention that really it deserves, because it is an unprecedented attempt to pull power from the American people and to really compromise American freedoms and American democracy. On the issue of retaliation, the Project 2025 lays out a retribution agenda itself. It would seek to make the Department of Justice, which is a department, and the employees in that department that have, of course, an obligation to uphold the Constitution, to work on behalf of the American people. It would seek to replace those civil servants with partisan loyalists, ideological loyalists, and we see even laid out in the plans a lot of references to retribution, to the targeting of certain individuals. That's not America. That's not freedom. That's not democracy. And we know it's not what the vast majority of Americans believe. And so I think it's really important that people are understanding the nature of these threats with Project 2025, and that they are going to do their research, because when you do the research, it's quite chilling.
David, it seems every day we're reporting about a new threat of violence or retribution coming from Trump or MAGA world.
Sure.
My question to you is this. If the threat of judicial action has now been neutered or rendered impotent by decisions like the one we just got from SCOTUS last week, and the GOP norms for the party, as we've seen from the 2024 platform, have now all been debased, what's left to protect Americans?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say re-electing Joe Biden and House Democrats and possibly Senate Democrats. I mean, you want to stop Project 2025 and you want to stop the weaponization of the Department of Justice, keep Donald Trump out of the White House, and put Democrats in charge of the lower house that's responsible for impeachment and other proceedings.
The Supreme Court's bombshell immunity decision now up against its first test. The ruling granting Trump broad immunity in his federal coup case against Jack Smith for, quote, official acts. It's now up to Judge Tanya Chutkan to decide which of the allegations in the indictment are immune from prosecution under the new ruling. Special counsel Jack Smith indicted Donald Trump over 5 alleged plots for him to stay in power. The Supreme Court giving Judge Chutkan some guidance on how to approach each. The most explicit being Trump's alleged interference with the Justice Department. Chief Justice John Roberts ruling that Trump's discussions with DOJ officials are official acts, therefore, quote, absolutely immune from prosecution. The second, Trump's pressure campaign against his own vice president in an attempt to force him not to certify the 2020 election results, something the VP does as a part of his role as president of the Senate. Judge Roberts noting that this conduct is, quote, presumptively immune, stating that while a president-vice president relationship is official, the president, quote, plays no direct constitutional or statutory role in certifying the election. Then there are Trump's efforts to get state officials on board to overturn votes and to implement that fake elector slate, which Roberts says are difficult to categorize. On one hand, these plots involve those, quote, outside of the executive branch. On the other, Roberts argues that the president's duty to, quote, take care that the laws are faithfully executed encompasses enforcement of federal election laws. Now, Trump's attorneys quickly asserting that same concept in public after the ruling.
Alternate slates of electors have been a method used by previous presidents, most notably Ulysses S. Grant, to ensure the integrity of prior elections. So we believe the assembly of those alternate slates of electors was an official act.
You got conservative Justice Amy Coney Barrett, though, notably disagreeing, stating that the fake elector scheme should be considered private and therefore not entitled to protection. Roberts then turning to Trump's statements about and on January 6th, upon which special counsel Jack Smith was likely to heavily rely, damning remarks like this.
They're not taking this White House. We're going to fight like hell, I'll tell you right now. The Democrats are trying to steal the White House. You cannot let them. You just can't let them steal the U.S. Senate. You can't let it happen.
The majority suggesting this likely now can't be used against Trump in court, arguing, quote, most of President's public communications are likely to fall comfortably within the outer perimeter of his official responsibilities. However, They do note that there, quote, may be contexts in which the president speaks in an unofficial capacity, perhaps as a candidate. Now, that's up to Judge Chutkan, who does have a long road ahead. Joining me now is Ankush Khardori, former federal prosecutor and senior writer with Politico, and Hugo Lowell, investigations reporter with The Guardian covering Washington and Donald Trump. Gentlemen, good to have you here. Ankush, I'm going to start with you. I mean, let's talk the practicalities here. What is the practical framework now for Judge Tanya Chutkan, considering the constraints or the parameters that come from this immunity ruling?
You know, I really do not envy her, because one of the deficiencies in the Supreme Court's opinion, I think, was that it failed to describe what tools she should actually be bringing to bear, what sort of tools of analysis she should be bringing to bear on the questions that they've now kicked back to her. I think as a practical matter, I see a variety of sources that I would be drawing upon, at least if I were in Jack Smith's shoes. Obviously, the court focuses a lot on the Constitution and determining whether or not a core constitutional power is implicated by the official conduct. But we also have evidence that we can draw from statutes, what Congress has provided in these areas, potentially historical practice, what other presidents have done, what former government officials and potentially even scholars have to say about what the scope of the president's duties are in this context. And I think it's going to be very tricky for her to try to sort through this, because the Supreme Court, I think, was far too parsimonious in explaining what sort of analysis they think she should actually conduct. So I really do not envy the situation she finds herself in.
Well, Hugo, one thing that we do have as a takeaway is a mandate on the remand back to Judge Chutkan for these evidentiary hearings to be conducted. You have exclusive reporting that came out early today, reporting that Trump's legal team is going to try to block these evidentiary hearings from taking place. In your reporting, you say that these lawyers are gearing up to argue that the judge can decide whether the conduct is immune based on legal arguments alone, negating the need for witnesses or multiple evidentiary hearings. I mean, Hugo, get into this a little bit more, though. What is the plan for Trump's legal defense at this point?
I think actually, to some degree, it's what Ankush is saying, which is they want these questions about what is official act and what is an unofficial act to be resolved on legal arguments and statutes, and do this without high-profile witnesses. What they don't want is people like Mike Pence having to take the stand to say, you know, Trump, in my view, was acting as a candidate Trump or as President Trump, because they think, first of all, that's very damaging politically. They think it's only going to help the prosecution because it would help them overcome the presumption of immunity for official acts, which is what they're trying to defeat, obviously. And thirdly, it kind of, if there is no other avenue to delay this, there is with invoking executive privilege or other protections to prevent people like Mike Pence and other people from getting on the stand. And so they have this two-prong approach, which is to say to Judge Chutkan, you know, we think you don't need witnesses. You can do this only on the legal arguments. But if you are going to call witnesses, and if Special Counsel Jack Smith is going to subpoena people like Mike Pence, we're going to put up these roadblocks. We're going to litigate executive privilege. We're going to have Pence say that he's got speech and debate clause privilege. And we're going to get people like Eastman and Mike Roman, you know, people who have been indicted in other jurisdictions, notably Fulton County, to say they have Fifth Amendment concerns and they can't testify either.
You know, Ankush, for me, one of the allures that comes, or the silver lining of an allure that comes out of this ruling, which I thought was a horrible ruling that is the idea of these mini trials, these evidentiary hearings, the idea that the American public can hear the sins of Donald Trump when it comes to this particular 1-6 case before they go to the ballot box in November. But there's a couple of wrinkles that I want you to walk through with me. One, it's federal court. So it's not like Judge McAfee in Fulton County. We're not going to have audio and video coming out of court. So assuming arguendo these hearings even take place, they're going to have to rely heavily on people like me and others, Hugo, you, to have to report what happens. But two, to Hugo's point, it's evidence. And I don't think the hearsay issues, there's not going to be hearsay exceptions here. You're going to actually have to put on evidence if you're Jack Smith. So how does Jack Smith anticipate, Ankush, these other challenges that would be executive privilege, speech and debate, these things that would end up being litigated and having to be appealed, I would think, before you actually move forward?
Well, I mean, a lot of these arguments have been raised by witnesses and Trump himself in various contexts before the indictment and post-indictment, right? So I imagine he will be doubling down on holdings that other judges have made in these areas. But I just want, you know, following up on Hugo's point, and I was fascinated to read his reporting, I think that, you know, Trump's position is going to be hard a hard sell before Judge Chutkan. And before I joined you, I just pulled up the court's opinion and was looking over the section on his tweets. And even the majority opinion says the courts may need to consider Trump's other communications, content and context of those other communications, what else was said contemporaneous to those communications, who was involved in transmitting the communications and in organizing the rally. So I'm sure if I were Trump's lawyers, I'd be making the same argument that this should just be decided on papers. But I think that's going to be very hard given what the Supreme Court has said about how, once you get down to the specific allegations, you need to know more about what the government is actually alleging and what the underlying conduct actually is.
Which, Hugo, and here's like us, I guess, airing our personal stuff, right, on national television. Hugo, you and I talk offline all the time about this. I mean, we geek out about this. And part of the reason why we do this is we want to see what the different permutations are going to be. And you and I have talked about this back and forth, right? So the affidavits are just going to be insufficient. Just the legal briefs are going to be insufficient. To what Ankush just said, if you need to get into context, it's not just going to be, Judge, this is what I think it is in like a piece of paper. It's going to have to be with whom is he having these conversations, the context within which he's having these conversations. And I do think candidate Trump is private conduct. And so, Hugo, I think that there's an unavoidable kind of collision that's going to happen where Chutkan's already made it clear that she doesn't find any of that conduct to be immune conduct, right? There's a reason why she denied the motion to dismiss that was filed by Donald Trump. And so I think you're going to see Chutkan very quickly setting an evidentiary hearing or hearings plural and making these rulings and having that move forward as quickly as possible.
I think that's true in the main. I think it kind of gets into a question of how Jack Smith wants to proceed with this and kind of what kind of evidence he wants to put up to make his case. Because presumably what's going to happen is, Judge Chutkan will order briefings from both sides, and Trump will say everything is official, and Jack Smith will say everything is unofficial, and there will be a large subset of thing, right, that will be contested. And to get over the contested parts, presumably Jack Smith has to introduce some sort of evidence, presumably from the grand jury as well. And I can just see the legal arguments coming down the pike from Trump's side, which say, if you want to introduce grand jury material, that's all, Rule 6E protected, and that has to happen in sealed hearing. And so maybe that's the compromise here, that Jack Smith concedes that it's 6E, it's grand jury, and it's done behind closed doors, and that way he gets the most out of the hearings and can keep the most amount of stuff in his indictment. And on the other hand, Trump gets a kind of a victory here, and that the evidence is not aired publicly in a way that is politically damaging, but at the same time loses on the legal front. I wonder if it's somewhere down the middle.
So, Ankush, to what Hugo's saying about the somewhere down the middle, if you're Jack Smith, do you trim the indictment? Do you go in and of yourself to sit there and try to maybe trim a line here, maybe a little bit of a haircut here, and try to move forward with a different indictment that's leaner and meaner, perhaps, considering this ruling from SCOTUS?
Yeah, I mean, there has been some speculation about whether Jack Smith ought to file a superseding indictment. I don't know what they'll do. I can see the argument in favor, right, trying to take the indictment. But as a practical matter, there will just be more challenges and more disputes, even on a superseder. And also, this happens as a matter of course in the federal criminal justice system, that, the government will bring an indictment. The defense might succeed in striking certain allegations or dismissing certain elements of the indictment, and the government doesn't need to supersede. That stuff can either be redacted if the indictment is presented to the jury, or the indictment may not be presented to the jury at all. So I don't think there's a need for Jack Smith to supersede this indictment, but, we'll see what they opt to do in the end.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.